I'm Luka Safonov, and I'd like to talk to you about the AP first as a secure development paradigm. API, of course, is just one of the components of the infrastructure. Well, hello, everyone.
Какие преимущества дает, в
Okay.
первую очередь, новая технология API First?
What are the advantages of API first as a new technology? First of all, it's your time to market. It becomes shorter. It's very efficient. It is really fail-safe system out of the box, including a system that allows you to do deep retrospective analytics of business processes. And of course, it makes it much simpler to integrate new business model, integration of new functionalities, and so on, which happen all the time. Of course, not everything is ideal. After the WASP Top 10 methodology, developers started to look at web applications as a target for security. And then mobile phones emerged, and most of the vulnerabilities of the big web actually traveled very seamlessly into mobile applications. When APIs became on the rise, again, the lessons have not been learned. So what are the questions that you as a business owner, service owner, or developer need to ask yourselves? What is this API doing, and who exactly is the API owner? It is quite a normal situation when you run a service which you don't own. How does the API how does the API handle the data? Does it disclose any personal data or any third-party data? That's a regulatory requirement now. You can get turnover-based penalties for that. And whether the information that your API is handling is just right or not sufficient or superfluous. API is a growing target. There are a lot of applications featuring API. And do we have prizes for best questions? Yes. Very good. So, I will ask you a question. Name me the application that hyped a couple of years ago. They did not even have a website. Everything went through the API and everyone wanted to use it. No, wrong. No.
Clubhouse. They
did not have a website. And their API was really half-baked, and I will show you. You will actually see how bad it was, but everybody started to pour their data into Clubhouse. Anyone uses Clubhouse now? No. So where's that Clubhouse? That's what I'd like to know. API is a product. It looks like a new trend when we provide some data for APIs, like weather reports or stock market analytics or whatever. But if you take cybercrime, for example, API as a product was sold in the old days for 1,500 rubles. If you wanted to, well, you would know better whether it is being sold now. For me, it was old times when you wanted to know who stands behind this or that number. So API as a product, the only thing as important is the data and the access to the data. So encryption is a key. Of course, I understand. It sounds much better in English. So you always need to know who actually triggers your handles, who accesses your API, whether they really are who they claim they are, whether they have rightful access to the data, and so on. Like the same example as I made about mobile carriers selling their databases, if there were triggers on the amount of information that the operator gets or type of data, for example, the carrier agent is in Saratov somewhere on the Volga, and the operator wants to parse data from Moscow. And actually, if he sells to 10 customers in one day and parses data on 1,000 customers, that should be hit as an anomaly, and of course that would be a reason for disruptive action. Data access. I actually recommend against access for everyone by default, creating functions-based, permissions-based, user-based access to data. And all the rights should be restricted, and you always need to be cognizant of where your data comes from. Because I'll give you a simple example. You have 4 APIs, and the bad actors can jump over 2 and 3, goes to 4, and 4 thinks that they have passed through 2 and 3, so it provides access to data. Bad idea. So what are the problems in this emerging technology? I have just given you several examples from the last 4 years. The fast payment system in the Russian Federation, Clubhouse, we've discussed that, and Dell. Just a week ago, there was a leak, Duolingo, MovieBox Pro, T-Mobile, and so on. And most of these companies, which sustained a data leakage, actually don't think this wild parsing of data through an API. They just don't think this is a vulnerability. They think this is a feature. Okay, they say, well, someone downloaded how many 3 million user data from Clubhouse. Well, shit happens, they say. We don't have a lot of statistics on this in this country, but abroad, there is a lot of statistics on this. I borrowed this from Corey Ball. Corey Ball is my colleague from OWASP consortium, who is one of the contributors to the API security methodology. And he actually supports the IPsec AI website and so on. You can see how many companies and what is the impact. Of the companies like Trello, we have used in Russia. Instagram is banned these days.
Pokemon Go,
Twitter, Facebook, Pokemon Go, Yandex. By the way, 43 gigabytes, the biggest contribution to open source. LinkedIn, Dropbox, everyone. Some of these companies are not represented in Russia or less represented, but nonetheless. In this country, there is kind of a culture to conceal this information, and it's quite an effort to actually get this information out to the light. In Moscow, there was a service that very, very serious, and it contains a lot of data about the citizens of Moscow, about their personal data, and so on. So the Moscow government asked me to resolve the issue with DDoSes. So there was an anti-DDoS service and web publication firewall, and everything was quiet there. And I told them that somewhere there is an API that's vulnerable, that's exposed. And they said, no, it can't be. It doesn't happen. However, in a training subnet, there was an training API, API website, and several criminal conspiracies actually parsed that website so actively that the main system just couldn't get enough resources and just stopped. But after they closed down the testing endpoint, the quote-unquote attacks subsided. Actually, there had been no attacks because the anti-DDoS panel was absolutely quiet. So the problem was about the dev contour, and the problem was in the exposure of their API. Of course, you would say that it would be a good idea to wrap it within a system. So if you have OWASP Top 10 plus OWASP automated threats, a popular but old framework, so if you put those together, you get OWASP API security. That's what we get now.
Если у вас по API Security это будет настольный какой-то документ для вас, как
if, for example, you are a backend developer and API security is your kind of bedside reading, these materials that you see in front of you, the standards, these standards will help you with secure development. Anyone in development here? Have you used OWASP SAM? What's the name of your company? Off the microphone. Anyone else uses OWASP software assurance maturity model? Ozone. Okay. So good companies with good IT teams, I know Ozone, Yandex, Cyan, VK, so they use it. This methodology is absolutely comprehensive from the launch of the product to the abandonment of the product. Now, the tools. You recognize the window? No hackers here?
А, кстати, вы знаете, как на жаргоне, да, burp? Вернее, как он называется? На жаргоне
do you know how they call burp, right? They just translate it into Russian.
Что хочу показать? Одна из последних
версий, a burp like you throw up.
Содержит в
So Burp Suite Professional, one of the latest versions,
таргетах в
if you go to new targets,
кто burp'ом пользуется, видели, наверное, это.
It has a special link to API testing. If you use a burp, you did see that. But if you don't, this is yet another tool that has a specific scan for an API.
Возвращаемся к API Security.
Now let's get back to API security.
Обратите внимание на пункты 1, 3 и 5.
So please look at numbers 1, 3, and 5. I hope you can see it well. They're all about authentication at the object level, at the properties level, and at the functions level. It looks like a lot, but if you take all security processes, I don't think that's enough. Actually, bullet point 10 encompasses all that. Statistics. This is not Russian statistics, but I think it is quite consistent with what we see in our own research. So rate limits, no one even checks anything. Several years ago, like a funny story, but not so funny. We tested a mobile application of a bank. The bank sent a 4-digit SMS code with the lifetime 10 minutes. So I actually tell them, are you nuts? 10,000 attempts and 10,000 possible combinations. He didn't even think that it can be automated. He thought that people would just make 10,000 tries in 10 minutes.
WASP-1 broken authorization.
OWASP-1 broken authorization, broken authentication, and access data exclusion. You can see that it's a different name, and I can tell you why it is named differently here, because this is actually a data leak. The rest are not very important, but let's look at the top vulnerabilities. Now, object-level authorization. On the right, you have a QR code. If you follow it, you will get to a special page in Telegraph. It's in Russian only. So you can see that the exposure is the endpoint. Of course, the surface of the attack is very, very broad. So every function, every identifier that is sent by the user needs to be authenticated. Broken authentication. It's how bad actors can compromise tokens and that come with authentication protocols. So, in a way, bad actors can use predictive methods that will enable their access to secure data. So, if you have lost a key, it may result in the loss of the entire system. In HackerOne, there was a funny example. One headhunter found a LinkedIn developer, found their personal repository and actually found a key, and it actually he actually wanted some authentication. He got $15,000 for a hack because the key turned out to be, very, 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 very important. So the developer was actually using it when working on the GitHub project. So, and the third most important is mass data exposure. So it actually is the merger of the previous exposure, and I think the methodology is updated once every 3 or 4 years. Maybe the next release will be up in 2027, 2028. And this data is actually responsible for what we see as data leakages from APIs of different sorts. Number 4, unrestricted resource consumption. This is about the resource utilization. This is about efficiency. This is about getting access and parsing data without restrictions. Have you heard about bot GPT? So, a bot GPT is made by OpenAI. Since the 10th of May, it's been scanning Russian internet resources, collecting data, and there is a special instruction from NCI. So there is a special instruction to block these bots in RUNet. To misrepresent what they have found so that our information could not be used for propaganda purposes, for the purposes of the discreditation of the citizens of the Russian Federation, the distortion of history, and so on and so forth. So there is a huge and expansive justification for this requirement, but this politics aside, this is yet another system. If this bot comes and if your API exposes data, right, it will collect, and then ChatGPT will respond to a prompt with information that you don't want to see. There are actually several names for the handles that it uses. Shadow API, like with Shadow IT guys know their own map of the network, security guys their own, developers their own. So Shadow API is an API that is not documented. No one knows who made it, no one knows who placed it, and so on. Orphan APIs. Documented APIs which don't have a traffic, which is long forgotten because kind of no one uses them. And zombie APIs. Old APIs that everyone thinks are not used anymore, but they are used pretty much. There were two companies. Company A sold to Company B an IT product. And the security guy of Company B called Company A and said, "You're attacking us, please stop." Turned out that when this software was sold to Company B, it went to Company A API, triggered something there, and Company A started to bomb Company B with some queries that Company B could not handle, and its security said that we are under attack. This was a zombie API, which had been forgotten, which had not been killed, and you asked me how it turned out in the hands of another person, how it was sold, but it was a root cause of a big problem. So you need to have a map of your APIs. You need also to look at all your endpoints, whether they work, whether they don't, whether they're exposed, and so on. You also need to do the T-harding of your exposed APIs through gateways, through settings, and so on. And have you heard about WAP?
Web Application and API Protection.
Web Application and API Protection.
И в квадрате Гартнера уже второй год находится.
So it's for the second year in the Gartner's quadrant.
Ну, вот эту парадигму WAP достаточно сильно бустит в аларм.
Internationally, Walarm is the biggest proponent of this paradigm. It has anti-DDoSes, anti-bots, anti-ML, and so on, blah, blah, blah. This is a comprehensive combine which repels attacks, makes your coffee, and does a billion other things. And 3 API security pillars.
Проверять информацию о работающих, неработающих API, чем защищены.
So we need to get information about the APIs that work, that don't work, how secure they are, how tested they are, and how being monitored they are. So you go to developers and ask of them, do you have documentation? No, we don't. We don't need this documentation. And in 2 weeks, you ask him, and what is this code about? And well, I don't know, it's not mine, the developer says. I mean, developers are normally people who are engaged in something else, and I actually don't remember something that happened a week ago. I remember just 1 day behind, 1 day now, and 1 day ahead. And developers, they really only remember how to get from home to office, then how to do work, and then they need to read the route back home from a sheet of paper. So, I mean, they don't remember what happened last week. Testing. Testing an API means dusts and susts and CI/CD pipelines and all that. It spans the entire spectrum from development to go live, and of course it all needs to be efficient. And monitoring. You need to analyze your handles. You need to analyze which data goes where. We have documented a lot of leaks of data and theft of data from the Russian internet. There was a Ukrainian hacker that downloaded 400 gigabytes, and we actually watched that in real time. 300 remaining, 200 remainder, and we actually told that to the owner of data. The Ukrainians are stealing your data, and the security guy told us we have over 500 endpoints. We don't even know where it comes from. So they don't know what NetFlow is. Data is very, very well known. The data pertains to Russians, all of these Russians. So they actually squandered it. API security strategy. This is how it's decomposed. Management, functionalities, policies, code review, SUST, architecture, dust, pin test, and bug bounties. Of course, everybody wants to have bug bounties in safe development. Of course, I'm not I'm not Mr. Lukatsky. I could also tell you a lot about bug bounties. Server deployment and API gateways. However, there is one API security solution that's not on this slide, but everybody calls it more or less in the same way. API security, прям так и называется. Штука API security. Вот если So there is a solution, it's called API security, a pretty telling name. There is another solution that's integrated into API security gateway. No, it's no, I was not talking about that.
Нет, это антиробот.
Anti-robot. Anti-bot.
Он тоже практически у всех есть сейчас.
I think everybody has an anti-bot these days.
Антибот.
No, it's not an anti-locker, it's an anti-bot.
Соответственно, защита от ботов, от скрепинга данных и так далее.
So it kind of protects you from bots, from data scrapping, and so on. I don't know or whether abandonment tells the whole story. The abandonment is the end of the life cycle, and you also have to manage the abandonment and liquidation. And very often, I don't know why this happens, but I think you have noticed that previously websites would say, go to old version of the site. Why? Because old versions, they are normally like infested with all kinds of bugs, but please go to the old version of the sites. So I don't know why they did that, but it was pretty popular.
Maybe it's done on purpose, old version. No. And accordingly, the things that were discussed before, here they are, 1, 2, 3, they are mitigated at these levels. At the level of testing, we can take everything, authentication, as you can see at the all three level can be mitigated if you have good monitoring, good deployment, good tests, good verification. You can detect it at every stage. Data leak can be detected by monitoring. You can see that data is leaked, data is going in the volume that is not the one that we require, and so on. Well, and my presentation is coming to an end. I recommend to use as a tool, as your table book on API security. I recommend this book, which you can see in the slide. Strange as it may seem, from yesterday to now, API Security Congress is taking place in Europe, and EU even have a link. You can have a look online and in the recorded way. If you are not, if you like API security, you can go. APSec University is also it's a set of free courses from API pen testing up to using it in LLM. Of course, you need a VPN. You can get a certificate, but you have to pay something. Well, if you don't want courses, it's okay, but there are a lot of things about utilities, about vulnerabilities, vulnerable API application. If you want to deepen your knowledge, to dig deeper into API security, do it. So I was too fast, perhaps, but well, there is a vote. I don't need it, but the organizers asked you kindly to vote for the presentation. It's a Q&A time. Questions and answers. Warm applause, please. I'm Oleg Zhurin from IQ. Thank you for the presentation. It was rather interesting. At the very beginning, API is okay, but there are different kinds of APIs. Perimeter API or internal API. Is there any difference between API protection of API for facing external sites or facing our internal structure? Is there any difference between externally faced and internally faced APIs? If we take zero trust paradigm, I would not speak about any difference. As Kirill Yermakov says, if you have a big company, you don't have to wait when you hack. You have to know when a hacker breaks in. You have a lot of people with unstable psychology. They can be blackmailed, and that person, the insider, can, well, pose a threat. Why wait until he or she does something wrong? You have to think in advance. Close everything. Externally faced, internally faced, alike. Right now, we are talking about the API gateways, externally faced, internally faced, but API gateway is a proxy entity for microservices. What about microservice level? What kind of mitigation measures we could take? Or are we going to leave it for gateway? Yes, some tools like some tools that are going to validate the service. Any more questions, please? Yes, please. I know your name and where you live. I am Sergey Chernomashintsev from Redin. Two questions. Is it true that developers choose API-centric approach to extend the time of development? And second, if we skip API, we wouldn't have any problems. The second, yes. Yes. No API, no problem.
Пока зал еще думает, у меня еще тоже маленький вопрос есть по поводу...
I have a small question.
Окей, сейчас я задам. По поводу
anti-bots, anti-robots. Can you tell us how can we defend ourselves against them? I can tell you, as if Russian vendors agree, 80% of attacks will be repulsed easily, but we shall never come to terms, we shall never agree, because the person who is the first to bring in the feed will get all the benefits. So the first method is a simple blacklist. You can ban all the blacklisted things. Then the limits, because the bot works much faster than a person. A lot of errors, 404. A person doesn't make mistakes so fast. User agent, some people build super systems, and the user agent bans the entire network. And different smart systems, machine learning, anomalies, analysis. That's so. We cannot do without machine learning. There was a conference, DSEC, in Dubai. If you don't have AI power, then you are not interesting to anyone. Any more questions, please? Kuznetsov, Jet Infosystems. 3 questions. Question 1. How Russian WASP does WASP has an official position or translation of top APIs? Second question, is there any API discovery and API protection? Is there any difference? Because we had a lot of zombie and orphan, but well, actually it's discovery, it's not protection or defense. And one more question. Without WAF, can we protect APIs? Or do we need to look what is inside? Yes, a WASP, well, it's all vague. I don't quite understand the question. Official translation, yes, at GitHub, it's available. Contributors do it, and in WASP logs you can see them. Well, now we have bad relations between Russian WASP and international WASP, although the Polish WASP is headed by our former colleague. As for the tools, you can go to API University and understand. It's there. I forgot to tell you, the documentation, yes. Documentation should tell you about what exists in reality, because you have the product and you have documentation, and documentation is old. You have much more methods now. Email, for example, collects post, get.
Да, ну, delete, put, да.
Email.
Собственно, там option. И так
Option.
они практически не используются. Вот если такие
They are rarely used.
генерит что-то,
If you have such headers, then it's something illegal. Instead of WAF, yes, you can protect by standard tools of web server, file to ban, but in burp, in intruder, there is a setup to make random intervals between requests. Why do we need it? Because threats are more and more complicated and advanced, so we need more advanced protection tools. Other questions?
Так, вопросов, кажется, больше нет, но нам нужно еще выбрать лучший вопрос.
But you have to choose the best question.
Про Clubhouse, да.
Clubhouse.
По поводу тестирования все-таки API.
It's about API testing. When we have a problem with authentication and authorization,
Можно же использовать в том числе
we can use
насколько я понимаю. Допустим, там
wrong
ты просишь систему удалить задачу,
tasks. For example,
неверный ID, то как
if ID is wrong, you can filter out
готов по ходу удалить,
this thing.
не подходит ID-шник.
So I'm ready to delete what you say, but the ID is wrong. In principle, yes, but I don't know. Any technical people, I need a broader context. I need a live example. But very often people invent a problem. So everything is okay, but action is allowed. But at the API level, I, as a user, do not have the right to delete the task. But at the API level, I cannot do that. We have to detect it at the monitoring level, at the testing, at the time of testing. It's horizontal movement. At the level of test, which at a synthetically filled project will show you that problem. Synthetic model, well, sometimes you don't have any model at all. I asked the developer. He says, well, we did something. Some data goes, business earns the money. Documentation, no. It was Mr. A who developed it, but now he left. He works in another company. And that person said, it's my personal code.
А вот человек сидит, давайте ему подарок вручим.
Let's Clubhouse. That's the best question. Thank you for your question. If you miss something, we have Telegram, we have email. Please send me your questions.